Okay, you are live.
Okay. Welcome to the board legislative meeting on Friday, January 15th at 12:30 p.m. or a minute within. Pursuant to Governor Newsom's executive order number N-2920 and the Alameda County Health Officer's current shelter-in-place order, effective March 31st, 2020, the East Bay Regional Park District headquarters will not be open to the public, and the Board Legislative Committee and staff will be participating in the meetings via Zoom. Yuli, how can members of the public join?
Yes, so members of the public can send me an email at ypadmore@ebparks.org. That, of course, would be the easiest way. Alternatively, they can go to ebparks.org to our agenda and find that information there.
Okay. I believe it's now to take the roll. Would you do that, you please, Yuli?
Yes. Board member D. Rosario.
Here.
Board President, pardon me. Board President D. Rosario.
Here. Did you get, can you hear me? Here.
Yes, thank you. Board member Dennis Waspy.
Here.
Chair Ann Wieskamp.
Here.
Interim General Manager Carol Victor.
Here.
Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs Eric Fueller.
Here.
Legislative and Policy Management Analyst Lisa Baldinger.
Present.
Federal Advocate Peter Umhofer.
Here.
State Advocate Doug Houston.
Present.
And myself, Yuli Padmore, Recording Secretary, I am present as well. Thank you.
And we're glad you're here, Yuli. Are there any public comments that we know about at this time?
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay. Then the first item to be discussed is state legislation and other matters.
So Doug, you want to kick us off?
Got my cue? Sure.
Yeah.
That's yours.
So I hope folks have taken an opportunity to take a look at the package and the summary of bills that we have before you. You probably got a note in going through these that there appears to be some maybe duplication, some overlap in some of the missions goals that some of these bills are trying to address. And I think this is largely due to the stated priority of this administration in Sacramento and in the budget in trying to address climate change. But in addition to that, we're all aware of some of the priorities that are coming out of DC and the new administration, which speak to climate change as well. So what's, I think, reflected in this package is sort of a bum's rush of legislation to try to carve out some space. And individual members definitely want to have a voice in how policy is going to be framed up and shaped for the coming years around climate change, resiliency, and adaptation. So with that, our first bill by new Assembly Member Ward, San Diego area, this bill would require the Strategic Growth Council to establish regional climate change coordinating groups. Currently, we have regional climate collaboratives, and so I'm lacking understanding the difference right now, and I'll need to research that a little bit further. But in the instance of AB 11, they hope to form these new coordinating groups up to 12 and lean on these groups to really regionalized actions and practices, again, on a regional level, very locally based, to address climate change and adaptation in those communities. And then the summary goes on to sort of list some of the proposed items that these coordinate groups should work on, including planning for sea level rise, its effects on local infrastructure, more efficient use of energy and water, where to try to look for and find sequestration opportunities. And I think that's of key interest to this organization in that we're always looking for opportunities to strategically acquire new lands, and then to utilize our lands as sequestration opportunities as well. So are we not, doesn't have a recommended position, Eric or Lisa. So are we're going to take everything at the end of the meeting as in the aggregate?
Yeah, these are all recommended for support. And so we'll just do it as one, kind of almost like a consent calendar at the end.
Okay. Sounds great. So that's my summary. I don't know if anybody wants to add on to that.
It looks like Dee has a question.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just the formation, are they gonna, you say these are gonna be local, so are these gonna be organized as joint power agreements between counties or 8 different agencies?
Excellent question. I need to dig into the legislation, the details of legislation a little further. So I don't know how they're going to be conjured up quite yet.
And indeed, to that point, and to Doug's point earlier about the number of bills that are kind of very similar, my sense, and Doug can speak to it more, is that these are all kind of placeholders to occupy the space of making sure that there's regional approaches to addressing sea level rise and climate change and some of the issues that were discussed at the board meeting on Tuesday. And I think we'll get to SB1, but I think probably what will happen is there'll be one effort to combine a lot of these approaches, and it'll be more fleshed out in detail. So your question about JPA is good, and we will look into it.
Great.
Yeah, good question though. Moving on to our next bill, and Yuli, do you want to post the summary again? This is a bill introduced by Assembly Member Werner Horvath, Southern California, and it seeks to establish within the Ocean Protection Council a climate adaptation center, regional support network, and presumably, I think what they're looking for is sort of like a one-stop shop, a clearinghouse to work with locals, to provide technical support, local governments, connecting practitioners one another, sort of deploy science-sourced actions to address sea level rise, working with states, universities. Good concept. Appears as though there's going to be some money attached to this bill. So to Eric's point, I don't know if any of these bills will be standalone. I don't know what the approach is going to be at the end of the day, because there is so much overlap and duplication that there may be a single bill or a package or a suite of bills that are consolidating, combining bits and pieces of these bills. We just need to bear in mind, how things are going to evolve. Moving on, we've got a AB 51 by our own Assembly Member Quirk. And this is, as the summary points out, sort of a companion to AB 11, but it more hones in on the planning side and spending money and resources on the planning side of climate adaptation. So I presumably, these members are going to be working in conjunction on the various pieces that they're looking to push forward, and there should be at some point an alignment, consolidation of some of these provisions in a suite of bills. Another one of our delegates here, go ahead.
Just on this approach, we are in the process of conducting a vulnerability assessment for the Bay Trail.
Yeah.
So the planning department received a grant from Caltrans to do that assessment, and we're in the process of it. So it is connected to things that we're already doing, and that the district is taking very seriously as we move forward. And I know Director Corbett mentioned Tuesday the need for additional resources, and I think we'll identify our vulnerabilities, and then we'll be talking to the communities that the shoreline is protecting, and making sure that they're aware of what's vulnerable and how much it's going to cost to adapt and to deal with that.
Go ahead, Dee.
So again, in terms of organization, is this something similar to forming something like HASPA?
Remind me what CASPA is.
HASPA, Hayward area shoreline protection. Is that what it is, Dennis? Dennis?
Well, no.
Hayward Area Shoreline Planning Agency. It's City of Hayward, well, landowners in this Hayward shoreline who got together, mostly environmentalists trying to protect stuff. Now they're trying to restore stuff, or we're trying to restore stuff.
So I don't know what the interface will be between this legislation moving forward. I know there's more of a focus on planning around adaptation. So I don't, with local groups, hopefully there would be some coordination that folks wouldn't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, great.
So moving on, this is to AB 52, another one of our delegation, Assemblymember Frazier. And I know that he's expressed a lot of interest over the break around Wildfire, in as much as one of the, the largest conflagrations was in his district. So what we've known, what we've learned when California is doing its carbon inventory to try to determine going forward how to deploy resources to address carbon change and reduce carbon emissions. What is not factored into that calculation is the carbon released by wildfires, which seems very incongruous. I mean, if folks may or may not be aware of this, but I think California's made $12+ billion in investments through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to mitigate that carbon. But if you were to calculate in black smoke carbon into that inventory, we're pretty much still at ground zero. We haven't made any improvements because of the fires. So I think what Mr. Frazier is trying to do is, moving forward, folks, we need to take into account these fires, and we need to assign resources that are more fitting of where the bulk of the carbon is coming from. And we all know that where that is. And I think by and large, the state is doing that. We see that in the budget, but it's just never really been articulated in the inventories and in our scoping plans moving forward. Questions?
I just to add to that, Doug, I mean, I think part of the intent is also to allocate the scoping plan, gets reevaluated every 3 to 5 years and reallocates where the money can be spent from the cap and trade market. And I think what Frazier's trying to say is, you need to put some of that money into, prevention, reducing the risk of a catastrophic wildfire, and also, accounting for that. And so I see it as a really positive step toward providing some additional money for a lot of the work that we do and others do to sort of do vegetation management and try to prevent the scale of the fires that we have.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Any other questions on that? Dee, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. I think any amount of funds that can go into fire prevention is more than welcome. It needs to be.
Okay, agreed. And we'll move on to our next bill, which is AB 67. And this bill, by Assemblywoman Petrie Norris, Orange County area. So it's sort of asking the state to take into full consideration and account the potential impacts of sea level rise, including flooding, storm surges, unpredictable tidal action, and the like, and take that into account when you're doing your planning and any kind of infrastructure development within the coastal zone. And then the bill sort of further calls on the state to create this multi-agency working group, sort of put together some strategies, some actions that the state should take with respect to sea level rise within the coastal zone and as it relates to infrastructure. And the summary goes on to sort of articulate who this bill envisions should be involved in the working group. So that's what I have for that bill right now. And then D, okay.
Sorry, who or what is the Ocean Protection
Thank
Council?
you, Dee. I wanted that question too.
So the Ocean Protection Council, and I'm digging into the recesses of my mind, but I think they were formed by way of legislation through a bond. And they're an authority, they're a funding entity. Through each bond, they've received tens of millions of dollars to deploy resources, financial resources, to protect the coastal zone and the waters within the coastal zone.
Okay.
I can't remember the composition of their membership. I think it's sort of a combination of state officials and then perhaps some appointees. But they're not really in my direct wheelhouse. I haven't had a lot of interaction with the OPC, but it has been on the books for, I want to say, 12 to 15 years.
Are they
I think
powerful?
I better describe them might be like a state. They're like a state coastal conservancy, but more focused in on the waters of the state, the ocean, seawater. And
If you could you get us a definition of them, a little more about it? I've never heard of them.
sure.
That would be great in the future. It was a totally new term to me and their responsibility.
And for Eric, have we ever approached them for funding for work on district shoreline projects?
Not certain. It's basically an entity that is comprised of the Resources Agency, EPA, and then there's a couple of elected officials that are on the commission. And it's I think, Doug, it's relatively new. I think it's within the last maybe 10 to 15 years that it was created.
I thought so.
But we'll do a deeper dive on it, Dee. I'm not sure if we've actually applied for funding or not.
Good.
Yeah, I was intrigued by the tens of millions of dollars. So
Yeah. So I know some of their programs, Steve, centered around ocean acidification.
mhm.
And making sure that resources are spent on healthy kelp beds. I don't know if they spend a lot of money on the terrestrial side of the coastal zone. It might be more in the water.
Yeah. Yeah, if they do delve into the bay waters, we do have restoration projects like the Giant Marsh, restoration of the eelgrass.
Yeah.
So might be some possibilities there.
Yeah, it's escaping me in terms of the scope of what they have and can do. But yeah, we'll report back for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to SB1 by the Senate Pro Tem Tony Atkins. This bill parallels in a big way sort of AB 50, which seeks to where are we? Yeah, it seeks to, again, create a new entity, California Sea Level Rise State and Regional Support Collaborative, which would be, again, overseen by a Natural Resources Agency and Cal EPA. I think the significant departure between this bill and then AB 50, which we spoke of earlier, is that this bill actually contains an annual appropriation of $100 million to direct to planning for sea level rise, and then there could be some direct allocations for projects as well to address sea level rise. So in as much as this is something that has been introduced by the Pro Tem, who's obviously a leader, beyond leadership, she is the leader. I think it's, given her gravitas over there in the Capitol, I think this is, and I think it's, Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, or at least I think this is a reintroduction. There was a bill similar to this last year. So I think there's going to be a renewed push this year. I don't know about the annual appropriation side of things for the $100 million, but in as much as we have a bit of a surplus, I could see the administration working with Ms. Atkins on this bill to set aside some one-time funding for the program. Questions? Then moving on to another one of our the folks in our delegation, Senator Skinner, the new chair of budget. This bill would require the Natural Resources Agency to work with Cal EPA to identify and promote sequestration goals as they relate to natural and working lands. Bill goes a little further, creates a natural working lands registry, and opens it up for the inclusion of projects that might be eligible for funding for sequestration purposes. Trying to think through the mechanism. So I kind of view this bit as a carbon credit program where folks can put land, for example, into the registry. Companies could come in and buy carbon credits through the sequestration possibilities of those natural and working lands. Kind of works hand in glove with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and cap and trade. Any questions? Nothing? Okay. I know. A lot of new jargon and a lot of new lexicon that we're dealing with right now. So, but this is the brave new world that we're going to be undertaking here in California in the next decade. So, better get used to it. So, the next bill, SB 45, is a reintroduction of a bond from last year, which was coincidentally also SB 45. And the what we're seeing is in this bill, and the content is the last iteration of last year's bill, vestiges of SB 45 from last year. The significant difference between this bill and last year's bill is the author. So last year's bill was sort of jointly authored between Senator Allen and Senator Stern, both from Southern California. This too is being authored by a Southern California representative. However, he is the chair of appropriations, so he's part of Tony Atkins' leadership team, which gives the bill a little bit more oomph moving forward. And you can see in the summary through the chapters, the content, a lot of money for wildfire, forest health, obviously, money for safe drinking water, funds for protecting fish and wildlife. I know there's a lot of money in there for the conservancies, and there's money called out for each conservancy, unlike last year's assembly effort, where there wasn't money identified for each conservancy. And I know in this instance, Lisa or Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you listed there's money available. Is it for the Bay Area program? Is it or is it for the authority, or do they need to work in conjunction? But at least in this bill, $100 million of what's available to the State Coastal Conservancy would be directly awarded for projects within the Bay Area zone.
The way I read it is there's specific money for projects that would qualify for restoration authority funding. Now, of course, that's administered by the Coastal Conservancy. And then there's also money for the Coastal Conservancy overall. And maybe Lisa saw something, but I didn't see anything specific to the Bay program of the Coastal Conservancy.
Yeah, I'm a little unclear because I've been working with various vehicles last year, and they're kind of all over the place as it relates to the Bay Area Conservancy, or program, I should say. But good piece of legislation. A side note, I've heard it mentioned from a lot of folks within the resources community that they're expressing disappointment that the budget doesn't make specific reference to a bond. However, I did have the good fortune of having a conversation on Wednesday with Secretary Crowfoot, and I've heard this also through other channels. But there's actually they have what's called the budget change proposal. It's another term for trailer bill language for a bond. The administration is contemplating working with the legislature during the course, if not this year, early next year, to get something on the ballot for 2022, be it June or November. A lot of that will be predicated, however, on revenue trends. And I mean, right now California's looking relatively healthy on the revenue front. So I think there's definitely is interest out of the administration to work with the legislature and try to advance something in the magnitude of maybe $5 billion around climate change and resource enhancements. So notwithstanding what the budget does or doesn't say, there is interest, and I'm fairly confident that there's going to be a lot of activity around this bill and then whatever materializes on the assembly side in terms of a companion bill. Any questions on that?
One question. Just it seems to me like, especially in regards to water safety, would that? I mean, to me, it would make sense to just have more regulation on the existing fracking permits. Would go a long way to preserving the water safety quality control. But is there any? Would this bond address some of that? Or I mean, I would think there would be a simple legislative fix to some of the water concerns.
I don't think there's anything simple when it comes to water.
Yeah.
Never has been.
No, I mean, senior water rights, junior water rights, water quality, groundwater control, drinking water. Not my area of expertise. I don't know how to respond to the question, D. Fracking seems to be something that's, it's not just a state responsibility in terms of the permitting. I think the feds are engaged in that as well. So we know where the incoming president is on fracking, which is, we don't know. But at least for the Newsom administration, obviously not entirely in favor of it, but I don't know. It's just not an issue that's come up more recently.
Okay, I'll just keep my eyes.
And it's not specifically referenced in the language. It doesn't reference at all.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on the bond, folks? SB 45.
Yeah. I hope it goes.
All right. So then our last bill, SB 63 from Senator Stern, who chairs Senate Natural Resources and Water. This would requires the state fire marshal to create a high and very high fire severity zone mapping throughout the state. So in moving forward and deploying resources around forest health, fuel management, vegetation management, we have a better handle about how to go about doing that just based on mapping alone. And then the bill also goes a little further to do some landscape level like home hardening, which means, translation, bill's looking to expand what the definition and practice of defensible space is right now from its current standard to 100 feet and beyond. So that would be important for the district, for fire protection matters, for those property owners that are adjacent to some of our lands. And then the bill would establish a grant program where those funds could be available for fire education and for prevention activities within the state. Yes.
Yeah, this is probably a question more for Eric. Because this is specifically looking at vegetation along roadways for us anyway, and in particular in our fuel break areas where we have FEMA grants, would we have to, if we wanted to do more vegetation removal in those FEMA areas, would we have to rewrite our prescriptions, and would that endanger our FEMA funding? Is there a conflict there?
I see Jeff is piping up. On the roadway funding, I don't think it would be a conflict in terms of the FEMA money, but if we decided to take out more, I feel like that would present an issue, but perhaps Jeff or Lisa or Carol know the specific answer to that.
Our plan is an adaptive management plan, so we have a lot of latitude within the RTAs to adjust to changing conditions.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was afraid that there might be, I mean, if it called for more removal than what our original prescription was, I was afraid it would endanger our FEMA funding.
And at least right now with the existing FEMA funding, I don't think, there's other challenges to that funding, including litigation that still continues. But our plan is in place, and as long as we follow our plan, we're not going to jeopardize the funding we've already gotten access to. In terms of, we do have to make sure that we're adapting to changing conditions, and our plan does give us some flexibility. And I think we have room to adapt under the existing plan right now. We don't need to reopen it.
Okay, good. Yeah, my other concern too was that depending on what this pathogen is that's attacking eucalyptus and acacias, we may have to revisit our prescriptions.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I think in terms of a dead or a dying tree, I would be able to remove that regardless.
Yeah, but we're talking lots.
Yeah, we are setting up an interdivisional team to look at that potential crisis within the agency regarding the amount of dead and dying trees, and the USDA is involved in trying to help us determine the source of the pathogen and how to best manage it. But that is going to be a big issue for all. My understanding, it's all of Northern California is having this die off right now.
Yeah, just the city of Oakland in my neighborhood, there's hundreds of trees just in my little walks in the neighborhood. It's scary.
I have a question about these trees that we know have a pathogen. Are there rules about what you can do with them once they're cut down? There's got to be some concern about something with pathogens.
And that's what the USDA and our staff is working on is
So far not. Okay.
to develop a best management practice, if you will. If it is a fungus, we don't want to spread it.
No. Good plan. Okay. What do we do for support on these bills? Do we do that now?
Yeah,
Yes.
so we'll take a vote.
Sounds good.
If you want to call everyone's name and then, or I can call, sorry.
Yulia, I'm going to let you call their name. That's great.
Sounds good. Chair Ann Wieskamp
Yeah. Yes.
and President Rosario,
Yes.
Director Waspy.
Yes.
Okay, all board committee members are in support.
Good. Thank you. All right, we will go on to B.
Budget. So, surprise, surprise. I mean, a lot of the gloom and doom that had been prognosticated that was to have beset California due to COVID-19 didn't occur. In fact, just the inverse. I know that this budget includes a $15 billion surplus, or identifies a $15 billion surplus. I think we're going to find out that LAO and some others have probably identified even a larger surplus at the end of the day. And as you're all aware, that is largely due to a few factors. One is, obviously we got some federal relief. That was very helpful, but more poignantly, and for the purpose of this budget, is just that capital gains has just gone through the roof. I don't even know what the dollar amount represents from capital gains relative to this budget, because the stock market has been so healthy and equities have been so healthy over the course of the last 8 months, inexplicably. No one seems to understand it. As the stock market goes, so goes California. And so we have a considerable amount of money for this year's fiscal year. LAO finance are projecting structural deficits in the next 2 budget cycles, the magnitude of several $1 billion. So this budget is trying to be cognizant of the fact that this boon won't last forever, and that spending is projected to outpace revenues in the next 2 budget years. So hence it's calling for the set aside of a lot of money through the rainy day fund to sort of absorb the blow in budget out years. But more specific to this budget, has around the resources space, it has some significant investments. $20 million for deferred maintenance for state parks, nearly $13 million for what's called the Youth Community Access Grant Program. That is for local agencies and for NGOs to encourage more activities, outdoor activities, particularly amongst disadvantaged youth, communities of color. This program stems from the enactment of Proposition 64, which was the legalization of cannabis in the state. And not to go into too much detail, but this will be an ongoing program. And I'm certain that the foundation, if they have not already, should take full advantage of the opportunities inherent in this program. $12.6 million for high priority acquisitions. They're calling them opportunity acquisitions through state parks. These are properties that larger land owning nonprofits like the Trust for Public Land, the Nature Conservancy, had acquired years and years back for the intention of transferring them to state parks or to fish and games, but there was sort of moratorium placed on new acquisitions through the previous administration. So they're looking to rev that program back up. And again, there's some strategic end holdings within units. There's private end holdings within units, the state park system, that the state would like to absorb into the greater unit. $85 million for forest management, mitigation and in-state parks. And then there's some money for wetland habitat improvements, and then $7 million through the Wildlife Conservation Board for human-wildlife conflict. And that speaks to the Secretary's biodiversity initiative. A lot of money in there for forest health activities, new money for fire crews. It's not mentioned quite yet, but the governor is seeking to enact and work with the legislature to enact in the next couple months some early action items around the budget. And one of those includes $335 million one-time investment in shaded fuel breaks and risk reduction buffers, both in WUI areas, but in other vulnerable communities, rural communities throughout the state. Very similar to the project that the state embarked on, whatever that was last year, year before, in Marada or Orinda.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how that money's going to. I don't know if those areas have been identified yet. I've got my feelers out there. I've done some outreach. I'm trying to identify where those areas are, or if they've had yet been identified, and if the legislature perhaps might have an opportunity to weigh in on identifying those areas. So that's yet to be determined. $14 billion on economic recovery, $600 checks to folks with less than median income in the state. A lot of money that will be focused on job creation, retention, and there's also some money in there for climate innovation, which is, I think that speaks to, back to your question, Ann and Dee, around what to do with the eucalyptus if they have to be falled. And part of the problem in the East Bay in particular is we're doing a lot of clearing and fuel thinning, but there's no place to take the materials right now.
Yeah.
That's economically feasible, I should say. So I know in this budget, there's nearly $50 million for its wood product innovation. I don't know if that goes into biomass. I'm not quite sure how they're going to award those funds quite yet. But I mean, that's a growing problem within the state, and we're seeing it even in my neighborhood in Auburn. They've done really good work along the interface in clearing, but there's just a lot of slash that is building up right now. And even though Auburn's in the Sierra, again, there's really nothing. There's no economically feasible solution in terms of where to take that product quite yet. So I know the budget's trying to address that. Sure, Dee.
Yeah, around biomass. I mean, I think we a couple years ago or several years ago, we applied for a grant to fund a biomass generator for our fuel breaks. And so hopefully that will be an option for us. I mean, using that down eucalyptus for electricity generation would be a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, in fact, we spoke of this, Lisa and I and Eric, yesterday, and we were on the call with Assemblymember Grayson's chief of staff, talking about possible funding opportunities moving forward around forest health. And yeah, I mean, it was really curious, Lisa's description about why it was that we didn't get funded. We weren't urbanized enough in the location, right?
That's correct.
What?
Although we're proposing serving nearly 3 million people, because the potential siting of this portable biomass generation unit was outside of the people.
Huh. Because Lisa, you can, because I know the proposed sites were the Anthony Chabot at the old gun range, and then the Point Pinole. I would think that would be
Correct.
close enough.
It was outside of the zone for the very specific description, but we are continuing to seek similar grant funding.
Okay.
Good question.
And
Since other states, Oregon, Washington, have the same issue, do we ever work with the other states to come up with some common solutions? Locations, biomass, other things like this? I mean, God.
good question. How long do you have?
Well, I really like you, but the sun is still shining and I hope to get a walk in today. But it just seems so foolish. My nephew lives in Klamath Falls, and he said most of the companies that used to cut down trees and all, they disappeared. So how do you get that industry to come back if they could use it? So you have
I mean, two really quick answers why California is different.
Okay.
Biomass is a very expensive proposition in terms of electrical generation. Nobody wants to buy biomass contracts. So when you compare the energy and the cost of energy associated with biomass versus solar power or more traditional generation facilities, it's just very expensive. The state has imposed some mandates to require the private utilities to acquire some biomass production and energy production, but it's not to any significant scale. And then secondly, in terms of the expansion of biomass in California, there's an EJ, there's an environmental justice issue associated with it. What we're seeing in California is there's a buildup of product and waste in the Sierra and other regions, but the only biomass facilities that can take the product is in the Central Valley. And there is a emissions consequence associated with biomass. So it's disproportionately affecting communities where the origin of the product, it's not origin from that area. Does that make sense? So that's a long answer about why California is where we're at relative to biomass.
What's the alternative? Is it going to be less expensive?
Where I think they're more resolute today about looking at solutions around biomass, and maybe because there are a host of plants in the Sierra that are non-operational right now, that could be operational. But again, it's the cost of transporting that product to a facility. The state would have to significantly underwrite the cost of that to make it pencil out.
And Anne, I see that Peter's popped on, but of your question about other states, we've been very engaged with Oregon and Colorado and some of the other states through Peter's great advocacy to make sure that that our interests from the Park District standpoint, but also California's interests are adequately addressed sort of at the federal level. But since Peter's on, I'll let him speak to that more directly.
Sure.
Doug made some great points. I just wanted to build upon that. In talking with some of the federal policy experts, there's always this need for creating a market for biomass. Is there a market for it? Meaning, if it's not going to be used for power generation, can it be used to make wood products? And then you have to create that wood products market. And so we have this resource, but is there a market for it? There's been this federal policy conundrum for at least 8 years, if not longer. And I think there's going to be some good things that will come out of this incoming administration really trying to get after that. And some really good ideas put on the table for this new incoming administration to look at. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
And really quick to Peter's point, for example, in Oregon, so they're taking wood product, and I can't even remember the term. It's like design board feet, where they're compressing it into a composite, and then utilizing that for homes and residential buildings. It's my understanding this product is going to be the main source for a 30-story building in
Wow.
Milwaukee.
Huh.
So we're talking about a wood structured high rise in Milwaukee. So there was a significant investment made in Oregon in envisioning what to do with this product. Whereas people are just unclear about the market feasibility in California. It would take, we're talking nearly $1 billion to put the infrastructure in place to do something similar to what Oregon's doing.
How much did the fires cost us?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm very pragmatic. I think you got to get them out of there, but whatever.
Fair enough.
Nothing's easy.
Nope. Okay. Back to the budget. And so yeah, where are we? What'd you do with us, Yuli?
I did look. You lose the budget.
I think yeah. I think that's really the crux of what
Okay.
we're finding in the budget. Honestly, again, money set aside for rainy day fund. Down some accelerated down payments on state pensions. It's a pretty solid budget. I think the give and take and the push and pull for this year between the legislature and administration will be over the surplus, and $15 billion surplus is pretty substantial. And and legislators want to be able to affect outcomes and direct funding for, if not for ongoing programs, for one-time funding purposes. So I think, we're going to see some changes as it relates to the how the state's going to use the surplus moving forward. And then Eric or Lisa, if you guys want to help me with the governor's task force to reduce wildfire risk. So this, I seem to recall that the governor formed this up a couple years ago. And a friend of mine, Jennifer Montgomery, was tasked to staff this. She's no longer there, but they finally issued their recommendations on January 8th and accelerated actions to combat climate change. And we've noted in the course of discussion of the budget some of those actions, but I think the intent, as described in the summary, is to try to accelerate the pace and scale of which to reduce wildfire and wildfire risk. And they want to start to treat, they being the administration and the various departments, want to begin to treat upwards of 500,000 acres annually to mitigate for fire risk. As I noted, as part of the early actions the governor's calling for, again, is some shaded fuel breaks. And we don't know how this is going to evolve and how we as a district, as a large landowner, how it's going to affect us. I would say there will be benefits at the end of the day. It's just yet to be determined. Eric, Lisa, do you want to piggyback on that?
And Lisa, feel free to chime in. I guess it just, we added this in here to demonstrate that the budget is reflecting much of what the task force came up with. And so the $1 billion price tag that was recommended by the task force, probably no coincidence that the same day the report was released, the budget comes out and it has $1 billion for forest health in it. The other piece of this that I found really kind of alarming is actually right in front of us now on the screen, where the acreage that burned just last year was more than 2017 and 18 combined. So that just shows that this investment in forest health and in mitigation and managing vegetation. I think people are finally getting it, if that makes sense. I think that the task force basically said, kind of to Ann's point, we need to invest heavily on the front end, because if we don't, the catastrophic impacts not only are bad for the air quality and for greenhouse gas emissions, but just economically we can't keep up. And so I think that my takeaway was this is a pivot to looking at what we can do beyond suppression to make sure that these catastrophic events are contained as best they can. They'll never be prevented probably, but at least that they're managed.
Eric, one small thing I'd like to add to that is speaking to the 2017 and 2018 acreage that was burned. Some of that burned again in 2020. So we're seeing fires return to where the fires happened, and further testament to the work that the Park District is doing with the vegetation management and the successes we've had there. So just because an area burned doesn't mean it won't burn again the following year. And I think having the science to demonstrate that helped to guide some of these decisions.
Question.
Ann?
Do they ever take on the issue of limiting where housing is allowed to go throughout the state, especially in forested areas? How's that?
Yeah, the trying to remember which bill it was. There's one of the bills that we discussed earlier does have a mention of building code design and what kind of materials, as Doug pointed out, can be used in buildings. I don't know if I mean, that's a local land use.
Okay.
So I don't know if the state can really get at that, but it's certainly I think it's certainly an important issue.
It just seems to me that there's a combination of the materials you use, how likely you are to have fires nearby, and God knows it has to be accessed in and out, has to be better than some of the communities have. And when you see places fire coming again, that's just ridiculous for the people who live there. It makes no sense. But that's a hard challenge, I guess.
Dennis?
Well, yeah, in response to Ann's inquiry, I live on the 10 Hills Trail, which is very controversial over here in Castro Valley. Not every, but quite a big number of these homes were built on 1 acre lots that come adjacent to the 10 Hills Trail. And I don't know how many, but I know many of the people that live there have done planned developments in their backyard. So you can put 4 more homes in your backyard right up against the Park District. And I would think that any, I think it's a struggle. Any county is going to say, sure, you're going to put in 4 or 3 more $1 million homes in that parcel. Great. Look at the property tax revenue. So it's a very difficult task. And also, I think we really need to advocate when the governor is suggesting that we burn off, what was it, 500,000 acres or 100,000?
Something like that.
We've faced this before, and unfortunately, CAL FIRE in our area, we are in region, in the Santa Clara Ranger Unit, they call them, divided into ranger units. Well, the Santa Clara Ranger Unit's very, very big. And I talked to the chief at one time, and he said, oh yeah, this was in the past before this big deal. But they were getting mandates to do prescribed burns on 1,500 acres, or 15,000 acres. I'm not sure what the number was, but it was a large number in the Santa Clara Ranger Unit. And based on the fact that we in the Regional Park District are surrounded by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, they just couldn't burn. So they had a job. Their job was to burn how many thousands of acres. They said, heck with it. We'll just do it in Stanislaus County, and we'll do it in Santa Clara County, or counties that didn't have the really, really stringent or very, very strict air quality rules. And at some point, I think we need to talk to those folks and suggest that, maybe for overall air quality, it might be a little better to burn off a couple hundred acres in March than, 4 million in October and choke everything in the state out.
Good point.
I don't know how we go about that, but I think it's grassroots advocacy at this level.
Challenge.
Christina?
Yeah, Director Waspy, you're exactly right about the air quality issues. I think that an even bigger issue is the wildlife permitting and the wildlife concerns. And we have construction windows based on nesting seasons, and then you have red flag fire days. And so, what I understand from the stewardship staff is there's like a couple weeks a year that you could do burning. So I think working with the air quality districts, but also the CDFW and the resource agencies will be really important to be able to do prescribed burnings, because I agree with you that we need to bring that back in as a tool. And I just, go ahead, Eric.
No, go ahead.
Well, just back on Eric's good comment that the placement of housing is a local land use issue. And so the state is limited in how much they can mandate that. But there were updates to the CEQA guidelines 2 years ago that have, that's one tool that the state has, is issuing the CEQA guidelines. So developers now have to look at wildfire and wildfire risks and whether their development will exacerbate wildfire risks in the way that they didn't used to have to. And the more science and the more mapping that we have about that, the more that developers will have to really look at the science of that location. So CEQA is something to keep an eye on as well.
Okay.
I was just going to add that I don't remember how many years back it was. It's not that long ago that some of the liability for prescribed burns, some of those standards were changed as well. And maybe it's related to what Christina just mentioned on CEQA. But you need a supervisor for any time you conduct a prescribed burn. I think they call them burn bosses. And for them to get insurance has become very challenging. So I know, and Doug, I know we talked with a couple of offices about that issue, Senator Glazer for sure. And it does seem like there's going to be some efforts at the legislative level to make it easier for the burn bosses to get insurance.
Wow. Nothing's easy.
Weren't we going to try and get a couple of our captains to certify as burn bosses? Because in the old days, Dennis and I were burn bosses.
I feel like I did see that, Dee. I feel like I saw some traffic from Eileen that we were actually trying to have somebody be qualified for that.
Yeah, it was either going to be in-house or we're going to contract out, something like that.
What a title, a burn boss.
Back in those days, it was easier.
You took the job and did it. I understand.
Kind of like got designated on the site there.
Informality. No magic answers. Anything more on that?
No, I think I'm done with my side of the presentation.
Okay.
I don't, well, not quite yet. No, I back.
Close.
So I guess it sounds like we want to have a bit of a conversation around the upcoming Zoom meetings.
Yeah, we actually have a very like 6 slideshow to walk through that. Eula, if you can bring that up.
My goodness.
Assuming everything's okay for.
Yeah, it's my daughter's birthday and she's.
Oh, okay.
She's celebrating.
It sounded like somebody was getting.
By killing a cat?
Yeah.
I hope not. It did kind of sound like that.
So we just wanted to run through the issues and the flow of the day for our Sacramento meetings coming up the 25th and 27th. So next slide, Yuli, please. And I want to also thank Yuli for putting this together. This is based on some research we collectively as a unit did to prepare for the Sacramento days, but appreciate the effort to put this together into a PowerPoint. So thank you for that. Just by way of overview, this was something we did last year at the request of the board in terms of making an annual visit to Sacramento. And obviously this year we're doing it virtually. And because of that, we spread it out over 2 days to try to fit as many of our delegation in. And we also took the feedback that you all gave us after last year in terms of simplifying or reducing the number of asks. So for this year, we've broken it down to 5 key issues, and we'll go through each of those briefly. And then also just to know that your team that's going to be supporting you is obviously myself and Lisa. Yuli will be joining us virtually along with Christina, and then Doug, of course. And also a big, actually next slide, please. A big shout out to Doug's team for pulling these meetings together already. As you can see, we've got 3 on the 25th and another 6 on the 27th. I think that means we only have 2 more that we could schedule. I think we have 11 in our delegation total. And I believe that I saw that Nancy Skinner is not available on either of those days. So maybe we just have 1, which would be Senator Dodd. For the agenda, we have the 5 issues: wildfire, which we've spent a lot of time speaking about already today, COVID funding and response, support for an East Bay Conservation Corps, the climate bond, which we also talked about, and then cutting the green tape initiative. Next slide, please. And I believe that Lisa, you were going to speak to the wildfire slide.
Yes. So as Eric shared, we decided to this year guide these conversations with 5 key topic areas that we'll be speaking to in each meeting. As we finalize the schedule, we'll also be informing the board which meetings you're attending and which topics you'll be leading as part of the discussion. And then for each topic, we'll have a primary staff lead should you want additional support during the conversation on specifics. So to start us off for wildfire, I will be your primary staff lead. We'll be sharing a lot of what we just had a great robust discussion on today about how wildfire continues to be something that the Park District is paying attention to as land managers of over 125,000 acres of open space. We'll be sharing with our elected officials a little bit of background on our vegetation management plan. Many of them, because of our longstanding relationships with their office, are familiar and supportive of our plan. Updating them that today we're spending about $3.5 million annually to reduce and remove vegetation in the East Bay Hills where our plan exists. We will be sharing with them the update of the trees that we just discussed that we're seeing with potentially deaths or a parasite or something at our district lands that needs to have a mitigation associated with them. And additionally, we'll be sharing our response to wildfires when they occur. That in 2020, over about 200 buckets were dropped on wildfires, both on our lands and on other lands in California, and the impact that those drops have on our infrastructure for wildfire response. So in conclusion, the 2 key asks we have for wildfire going into these meetings are: we are supportive of the governor's proposed $1 billion for wildfire resilience and vegetation management, and a district ask of $3.5 million to increase our fire suppression through infrastructure repairs and upgrades.
Next slide, please. So with regard to the COVID funding, as I'm sure everyone is aware, the federal government passed the CARES Act back in March, April, which had a significant amount of funding for local assistance. And we asserted that we qualified because we served a population of 2.8 million, which was above the threshold to qualify. We've yet to realize any of that funding, but as we've sort of examined it more and more, we're learning that that funding has gone from the federal government to the State Department of Finance, and then it goes from the State Department of Finance to the counties. And then the spending decisions are made at that level. It's our understanding that there's still some CARES Act money left. I'm not sure if it's still 3.8 billion in California, or if that's been reduced. It probably has been some by now. But the most recent federal package for COVID, which did not include any local assistance funding, did extend the deadline to expend unspent CARES Act funding. So if there is still some left, we're going to try to figure out how best to access that. And even if we can't access it this time around, we want to learn the process so that in the new administration, if additional funding for local government assistance comes through, which Peter can speak to in a few minutes, but I think it seems likely. The president-elect just announced, I believe yesterday, a very robust package. We want to know how that process works so that we can make sure that we're qualifying for it and applying for it. And to date, non-FEMA related expenses, emergency related expenses for COVID, we think is about $3 million. That's non-staff leave funding that the district has incurred. So this would be for things like PPEs and other things to keep our staff safe that are directly related to COVID. So we will be continuing to try to get reimbursed through the local assistance funding for that $3 million of incurred cost. So our ask there, sorry about that. Our ask there is to ask our delegation to contact the Department of Finance to see how special park districts can qualify for local COVID relief funding. Thank you. So support for the East Bay Conservation Corps. This is something we've been talking about in this committee for a while now, as we've seen more and more bills come through, mostly at the federal level, on this reestablishing a civilian conservation corps. And we've also been in contact with the State Conservation Corps Executive Director Bruce Sato. In fact, we started conversations with him 3 or 4 years ago about potentially reestablishing an East Bay Conservation Corps. And as we discussed earlier, the governor's budget has funding to add 14 new conservation corps in the state. So we want to be prepared. We want to be able to host one in the East Bay if that budget request goes through. And then we also note on this slide that there is money in the climate bond for conservation corps. So all signs are pointing to this becoming a possibility, including the federal government's efforts likely to have some funding for conservation corps. So in order to be prepared, we need to find a site and have it ready to go. And I'm not sure if Jeff is still on the call, but I know we are working. In fact, I think he's actually touring some of those sites, or did tour some of the sites today with the Conservation Corps. And our request of our delegation is a $10 million infrastructure funding request for establishing a camp, so that if we identify an appropriate site, we will actually have the money to develop it and have it basically shovel ready, so to speak, for a conservation corps should the line item occur in the budget. So that's our request on that. Next slide, please.
All right, so for the climate bond, which we discussed a little bit earlier, as you can see on the screen, and Yuli, you can go ahead and just slowly click through the different chapters, but there's a robust number of grant programs being developed in the $5.5 billion bond package related to climate response, including wildfire and vegetation management, healthy rivers, lakes, and streams, protection of fish habitat. And then a key area is the crew and the workforce development in complementary to Eric's last slide. So with the recent Beacon study by the Park District looking at how green infrastructure projects can help create and support jobs, one area that we are interested in seeing the climate bond expand into is investments in green infrastructure. Other than that, we are really supportive of what's currently being discussed as part of the package as it relates to Bay wildfire funding and the likes. And so with that, we're asking our delegation to support the Climate and Natural Resources Bond of $5.5 billion to please co-sponsor if speaking with a state senator. And then additionally, we'd like to work in complement with all of our delegations' offices as conversations and discussions around the bond continue to ensure that they are well briefed on the grant programs and the investments that have successfully served the East Bay communities, and how we'd like to see negotiations guided as part of the discussions of the bond package. All right, and lastly is Cutting the Green Tape initiative. And for this one, I welcome AGM Christina Kelchner to make any additional comments, but the Cutting the Green Tape initiative is an initiative through the California Natural Resources Agency with the California Landscape Stewardship Network, which is a network of statewide collaboratives who are interested in advancing stewardship work. The Cutting the Green Tape initiative at this point in time is a public-facing document of recommendations, both of CEQA exemptions that could be utilized to further advance stewardship projects or slight legislative changes. It is simply a recommendation document at this point. The next steps for the document will be hosting roundtables with agencies such as ourselves to discuss the implementation of the recommendations. So where we are in terms of an ask around Cutting the Green Tape is we're asking our delegation to support the California Natural Resources in the initiative and to take part in the conversations and work with the district to understand how implementing these recommendations would benefit stewardship projects.
That concludes our presentation, and interesting to see those pictures from when we used to meet with people who stand so
Real
close to them.
time. Different world.
So we'll be providing additional details, and as you probably noted, we'll make some assignments for people. I think Director Corbett mentioned this at the board meeting to make sure that the directors know which meetings that we would like them to attend. We're going to try to match you all up with people whose districts overlap your wards. And we're going to try to limit the participation to 3 board members per meeting at the most. And in some cases, it may just be 1 board member. I think Assembly Member Frazier, the only person that overlaps is Director Coffey. So stay tuned. We'll be providing additional details next week. And we'll also provide the talking points that were requested. We do have a memo, which I'm hoping you all have, but we'll refine that a little bit and make sure that there's some bullets that suffices talking points for each of those 5 issues. So I guess with that, if there's any questions.
Anyone? Okay. So what's next to discuss? Anything?
So I don't know, Doug, if you want us to start with this or if you want to start with it. You did a great job yesterday with Assemblymember Grayson's office explaining what we're trying to achieve. But essentially, we are looking for legislation that would give us power to, or the ability to not only abate a nuisance, but also acquire reimbursement for having removed a nuisance. Yeah. Park districts, Public Resources Code 5500 do not have that authority. We simply can cite individuals if they are, some folks have put rock gardens, and we have 4,000 neighbors, and they put rock gardens, or they try to draw water out of a pond, or they decide to put a shed or something like that on our property. And we can cite them and ask them to remove it, but we don't have the legal authority to remove it ourselves and to also then incur compensation. So what we're proposing to do is give the park district the same ability to abate and recover costs as cities and counties. And in order to do that, we have to incorporate it in our Public Resources Code language and to give us the authority. Currently, we have to go through a long legal process, which is costly, through the district attorney's office. And as you know, district attorneys have a lot of other things to be concerned with. So we're seeking this authority through legislation. It would only impact 5 or 4 actually districts throughout the state: ourselves, Mid-Peninsula, Monterey, and Napa. Those are the only 4 that are in the 5500 series. So we've been working very closely with Mid-Pen, and I believe they are having some success with their Assemblymember Mullen to be the author of the legislation. But we've also spoken to Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, Senator Glazer, and now Assemblymember Tim Grayson's office about support from our East Bay delegation to advance the legislation and move it forward. And I do want to acknowledge Jason Rosenberg for bringing this to us. This was something that he highlighted as a significant cost to the district and a significant, frankly, amount of time that goes into trying to deal with nuisances and incursions on our property. So really appreciate his bringing it to our attention, and it looks like we may actually be able to do something at the state legislative level.
And Director Wieskamp, if I may, wearing my district council hat, addressing encroachments within the Park District has been enormously frustrating as your legal counsel, because we don't have the tools available. Our choices are to file a lawsuit, and which is very expensive, and then and there's no opportunity for us to recover any of the costs of that lawsuit. These administrative remedies have been available to cities and counties for decades, and they are powerful remedies, and they have to be used carefully, and we would still follow the Park District's good neighbor policy and try to get voluntary compliance before you resort to using these measures. But they also have a lot of due process built in, so they are protective of the rights of a property owner as well. This was something that I have had been trying to move forward for some period of time, and when Jason came on board, Jason was able to craft the legislative language we need to bring it forward, and I'm really glad to see this movement. The thought behind this was when I was dealing with encroachments, I was looking to see what other public agencies were doing to deal with their encroachments, and the city of Palos Verdes Estates, which has a lot of very lovely properties that back up against an Olmsted Park, and those neighboring properties had encroached into that public space. And so the city set forward a very comprehensive plan of to address that encroachment, but they had these powers of enforcement that we don't have. And I think it's a really important tool to protect our parklands.
Okay, that was heartfelt. You've been through it. Questions? I think everybody's on board.
That's great. And the 4 5500 districts that Eric pointed out to, there's actually more 5500 districts than that, but those are the independent districts. The dependent districts can get this nuisance abatement power through the county that they're part of. So you even have districts organized under the same 5500 with different powers.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay. Any other comments on this? Everybody thumbs up, I assume? Yes. So that's good.
So we do have a member of the public that is on the line that would like to make a public comment. I just wanted to check if we would want to address that public comment after state legislation, so that if they needed to move on, we could do that, or we could wait until the end of the meeting. General.
If they'd like to make a comment now, I see nothing wrong with that. Is everybody in agreement?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so we have Dr. Jerry Jerome Robinson on the line.
Welcome.
If you want to start your video. And Dr. Robinson, we would just ask when you do, if you want to start your video, you can, or if you wanted to just it to be audio, you can do that as well. But if we could keep it, I don't know, up to a minute would be good. So we'll open the floor.
Okay.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question concerning the water at Point Pinole. The public or the guests at Point Pinole, we don't have access to drinking water. Around a few months ago, maybe around 2 or 3 months ago, they turned the faucet on for the dogs. And I was just wondering when the guests at Point Pinole will be able to have access to drinking water, because dehydration is the #1 cause for injury on the trails. So I do believe that it's a very serious issue that should be addressed.
Okay. Dr. Robbins.
So in terms of public comment, is an opportunity to make a comment, and staff can only respond very briefly, Dr. Jerome, due to the Brown Act. But we did turn off the water in response to the public health orders and the direction we were given regarding high touch facilities. I do think it's worth revisiting the water being shut off and just having an internal discussion with staff, and we can update the board further at a board meeting in terms of our COVID response.
Could we also look into the possibility, we have some water available where you can fill your own canister. Maybe we could look into whether that would make sense at that location.
Yes. And we will report back to the board at another public meeting. Christina Kelcher had a brief comment.
Yes, I just wanted to ask the commenter if he could make sure that, Yuli, thank you, and that you get with Yuli so that we have your contact information. And I've already passed your comment along to our head of operations. So we'll have someone get back to you as soon as possible.
So thank you very much
for the response.
You're welcome.
We like our constituents to enjoy what they're doing out there in the parks. Okay. The next item we're moving to.
Yes, and I was going to say, Chair Wieskamp, we have no further public comments, so we can move forward with federal legislation.
All right, on to the federal.
Yeah, so we just have one bill to address, and then I'll turn the floor over to Peter. And the one bill that we have was actually not in print when we brought it out, but it is a reintroduction of a bill that we supported last Congress. And it essentially tries to make the connection between investing in parks and investing in parks in urban areas with economic development. And it's a way of infusing additional resources into urban areas for park development. And it would potentially benefit some of our parks, including, I think, maybe Point Pinole, if the program were to move forward. Some of you may recall several years ago, maybe even a decade ago or so, there was an urban park program that was defunded and has not been funded since. The Park District actually did not qualify for that program because they allowed grants for cities and counties, but not units of local government or special park districts. So for a representative series bill last Congress, Peter was able to secure specific language in the legislation that said special park districts would be eligible for the grants. And we'll be working to have that language included into HR 51 this time around. I don't know, Peter, if you want to have any additional comments on that bill or the representative's efforts.
Just to say that Representative Series from New Jersey has had a similar bill for about 3 different Congresses, and there's a lot of support around a Civilian Conservation Corps bill, and other pieces may be included like this one. may be part of that larger package of bills that'll could merge together. And so I recommend support for this bill. And after the discussion, if you have any questions, just like to briefly talk about Senate bill on outdoor restoration that is similar in nature.
Okay, questions?
I have a question. Can you describe exactly what an investment means as when we're directing or asking the Department of Human Resources or Housing and Urban Development to invest? Does that mean actually, well, can you describe that for me? What that actually means?
What does it mean?
My recollection is it's a grant program specifically aimed at addressing infrastructure needs for parks. So, you know, if like the water fountain issue is a great one. So if you wanted to upgrade from a traditional water fountain to water bottle filling station, that's the kind of thing that you could do with these resources.
Okay, upgrades.
Oh, so infrastructure for existing parks.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think it actually also provides for park creation. So if there was an area in a community that, you know, maybe it was a vacant lot and the city wanted to or the community wanted to create a park there, I think that they could receive funding through this program, through the grant program.
That's correct, both existing and new parks.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dennis, did you have any question?
No, I support this.
Okay. Then would we like to take a vote to support? Yuli?
Do we need a motion?
I think that would probably be, oh, come on. All right, D. I nominate you to make a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Call the roll. I'm learning from you.
Yeah.
Chair Wieskamp,
Yes.
President Rosario,
Aye.
Director Waspy,
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And you had another item you wish to discuss, Peter?
Just wanted to briefly mention the Senate Outdoor Restoration Force Act. It is a bill that came up late in December. It was an effort to cover $60 billion in restoration funds, and special districts are included. This tracks very closely with the legislation I talked about a minute ago, Civilian Conservation Corps, meaning trying to get people back to work and to improve our local, state, and mostly local and state parks, but also federal lands as well. And the Park District has lent some support to that effort. I think it will continue to gain traction. The bill was introduced right at the end of the year. It's being reintroduced in a week or two. And just wanted to mention it to you because we've had some earlier conversations about how do we build upon our success from last year of Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Great American Outdoors Act. What's the next big piece of legislation that has momentum? And that's the Civilian Conservation Corps Act and other bills that'll be probably attached or included or merged into that. So I just wanted to mention it. I'll keep you updated as introductions of bills and hearings start to happen on that. Could be one of the things that flies below the radar with all the other big issues on the federal policy front, but there's good support for it, and I'm optimistic.
Yeah. I like to hear about optimism right now, especially from Washington. Question?
I can keep going here if you'd like me to.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to say, in light of what happened on January 6th, the U.S. Capitol insurrection, I would give you a little bit of insight into my conversations and what I'm seeing. One is It's shocking, it's maddening, and the feeling is very, very raw with members of Congress. You have seen the buildup of security, and just to give you a perspective on how far out these fences are being installed. If CNN's done a pretty good job of showing it, but the fences start at Union Station. So that's 4 or 5 blocks from the Capitol. The mall is completely shut down. There are fences upon fences on Independence Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. There's 25,000 National Guard. There are 5,000 law enforcement officers on top of that. The Speaker of the House announced a security review to be led by Lieutenant General Russell Honore, who you may be familiar with, who has had many prominent positions in the military and was very active in Hurricane Katrina and the restoration of New Orleans after that. He has impeccable credentials and I think will offer a very honest assessment. He has 3 tasks he's been given, and I don't have many more details because that was just announced as we've been on. Preparation for the inauguration is moving forward, and last thing I'll say, members don't feel safe right now. Members are buying bulletproof vests. There is, meaning members of Congress, and it's been on the news, so you probably have heard that or seen that. But there's a real show of force and security in order to make sure the inauguration goes fine and the opening and start of Congress continues to move forward. I just hope and pray that all the state capitals are taking all the necessary measures they need to and working with their security experts. I would encourage the Park District to issue a statement condemning these attacks. Many organizations across the nation have, and I'll just leave it at that. I can go on to talking about COVID relief and economic relief plans if you'd like me to, or if people have questions about the state of play in the Capitol, I'm happy to. I was downtown Wednesday and saw it firsthand, the measures that are being taking place, and it's quite eye-opening to say the least.
Very sad that it has to be done. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Peter, sorry, Director Wieskamp, but Peter, would you maybe, I think you're making a very important and profound point. Could you maybe compare this to what the scene was like on 9/11 in DC?
There was a lot of 2 things that come to mind because I was there on September 11th in the Capitol and the anthrax attacks that happened in 2002. There's a level of intensity that I remember distinctly in 2001 and the levels of security that were brought to bear. And I also remember that intensity in the hallways, but it was a little more subtle around the anthrax attacks. This is even, I would say, 2 or 3 levels more visible and more intense because of what took place in the Capitol, at least right now. And it may be because of the inauguration. It may be because of a lot of other matters we won't talk about on this here. But it's all to say that people are taking it very seriously, and there's lots of different measures, visible and not visible, being deployed. And so there's an ongoing investigation too in the place of work. And so it's very complex when you think about it. There's still lots of blood in the hallways. There's still lots of broken glass. So, and some of the police officers are just telling their stories for the first time today on the national news. So all to say that there'll be proceedings for impeachment in the Senate, and timing is not entirely clear on that yet, but there's some COVID bills that'll have to be dealt with, a budget bill, nominations, and an infrastructure bill that are all 4 or 5 things right out of the gate that'll be the intense focus for the Congress. I'm happy to talk a little bit about that now if you'd like me to.
I think if you have time.
Okay. I'll just briefly touch on President-elect Biden talked about a COVID and economic relief plan of $1.9 trillion yesterday. That included $350 billion for state and local aid. I've been in ongoing conversations with the transition as well as Senate offices and House offices about making sure special districts would be eligible for that aid. The good thing is that President-elect Biden has raised the awareness of the need for more state and local aid. The challenge is to change this CARES Act formula that just gives it to states and counties and doesn't give it to special districts. But I think we've made a lot of good progress. But I need help. And we need more special districts and our brethren around the country to weigh in with our senators in other parts of the country. Ohio and Illinois have a ton of special districts, and so does Texas. So we're trying our best. The recently passed $900 billion COVID relief bill was passed towards the end of December, passed by the president, did not include any money for state and local aid. That was one of the main sticking points in the negotiations for the last 9 months. And it came down to, that was an issue, it was the last issue on the table, whether it was going to get included or not. And at that time, it was being talked about around 150 to 170 billion, but or even less. So unfortunate, but we had a chance and continued to educate a lot of members and staff about this importance. One of the things that's resonated the most in my conversations at very high levels has been parks have been a savior for people and their mental health. And people understand that and don't realize, that East Bay Regional Park District, for example, has had 30+% increase in visitation, and many other parks have had more. So those arguments and the public opinion surveys that the park district's taken has been very helpful. So thank you. I will share that there was a bipartisan COVID relief bill that you may have heard about in December when those negotiations really heated up. There was a 5% set aside for special districts in that state and local funding piece. So we got some visibility and got some traction and had an opportunity to educate members some more on that. Like I said, I'm continuing to talk with many of the kind of leaders on state and local aid, such as Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi's office, and many others. So I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer questions if people have any questions about COVID relief.
Anyone? A lot to be done, but we're making progress.
Dee, go ahead.
Peter, if I heard you right, so this current the current COVID relief, so there's no state or local or special districts. There's no money in there for states or local governments at all.
Correct.
Wow. And then, but there is. There's no possibility in Biden's 1.9 relief for special districts as well.
That's right. They don't have a lot of specifics, even though it's a 19-page plan.
Yeah.
But I've had ongoing conversations with some of the incoming appointees, as well as with the people that are going to write the bill, which is the House and Senate staff, that I would be really surprised after 9 months of some good education. But we need our delegation to step up, I'll be honest. Senator Harris has been helpful, and we'll continue to work all the different levers and supporters that we have. But so to answer your question, Director Rosario, I think there's a good chance that special districts will be a part of it. It may be inartfully drafted right now. It may not be, you know, the perfect way we would want it to be, but I think the outlook is good for some amount of money to come to special districts. It may not be as much as we want, but it's going to take some work.
Yeah, anything would be helpful, but let us know what you need, and because I know the California Special Districts Association, I think they stated their advocacy for recognition of special districts on the national level as well. So
yeah,
they have been advocating, and also Dennis, thank you for the CRPD letter last year. We'll probably need to do something like that again this year. The issue really is, Dee, that there's not a national organization of special districts. So, I mean, we can send, and we did last year, we can send to the Special Districts Forum a letter, a call to action, but there's not an entity in DC similar to CSDA, and that's made it really hard for Peter to break through. But we've accomplished a lot, and we'll just keep at it. And we're going to be doing virtual DC meetings probably in March, where we'll be raising this issue again.
On that issue, have we at least tried to engage the other states that have special districts in any meaningful way?
We've done some, and mostly through the Special Districts Forum list. We have a fairly current list of that from the 2009 posting of it. One of the challenges that I personally have faced is that most all of the general managers, you know, at some of these other organizations have all retired and moved on. So we were able to establish a contact through an individual that retired in Ohio, and we were able to connect with the new person, but the legacy of advocacy just isn't there right now, unfortunately.
Okay, that's something to work on. Thank you, Peter.
Sure thing. I'll just touch on Senator Designate Alex Padilla has named his chief of staff and legislative director. They happen to be people that I've worked with. His chief of staff worked with Senator Harry Reid, but also Antonio Villarosa. And his legislative director most recently has been with Senator Feinstein. So I see that as all positive. Likely that Senator Harris will resign in and around January 20th. And Senator Designate Alex Padilla would be sworn in on the 21st. So exciting times. On the Senate Democratic majority, and what does that mean? I highlighted some of those the early legislative priorities: nominees, budget, COVID relief, and infrastructure. What will need to take place is in progress slowly is an organizing resolution, which will determine how a 50-50 Senate works. And having worked in a 50-50 Senate last time it happened, it was, much of it was determined by who was the majority leader, even in a 50-50 Senate. So Senator Lott determined what was on the Senate floor and how many amendments were offered and what were the priorities for the first half of the year or for the year. So Senator Schumer will be the new Senate Majority Leader, and he will have a lot to say about that. I think it's accurate to say that he's definitely has an eye on some of the things we've been talking about here, such as Civilian Conservation Corps and climate resilience and infrastructure. So I'm excited about the year, and what can get accomplished, even though it's been an intense 4 years and it's been an intense month. And in terms of Biden-Harris administration appointments, you see the list in front of you of the cabinet members that have been announced. They're just in the last really 48 hours, or the last week, but definitely in the last 48 hours, there's been new names added to underneath all of these cabinet level and senior White House officials, and many familiar names. Just to give you an example, I don't know who the National Park Service Director will be. And for some of these important positions, they may be acting. They may be people that are just in there for a few months and go back to their old jobs. And someone is then announced in 3, 4, 5 months' time. So there are definitely going to be people going into the White House and to, after it's cleaned, and into the agencies on the first day. Those names, again, are starting to be shared today and will be probably coming out more over the weekend. I don't know if people have questions about appointments or nominees. Happy to answer questions on that topic.
Anyone?
Dee,
Dee?
go ahead.
I'm curious as to get the Biden's appointees through the process. Is it just a simple majority, or do they need the 2/3?
It's a good question. Just a simple majority. So that's where we are.
So theoretically, if the vote goes by party, it'd be 50-50, and then Vice President Kamala Harris would
right.
vote in. Okay.
I will note there are some moderates, and they, I mean, usually the president gets the nominees and that they want, but if on legislation, it might be a little different for some moderates, some of which are up for re-election again, such as Mark Kelly from Arizona, wonderful newly elected member, but he's got to run for re-election here in 2022. So it makes for an interesting time for some of these members.
If I may for a moment, Peter, we wouldn't be, for many of the nominees, you'd be expecting, it really wouldn't be a 51-50 vote for many of these. You would expect some Republican support. Is that correct?
Some.
Okay.
I think they're probably, I don't want to, it's a tough call. I'm remaining hopeful that there'll be some bipartisan support for some of the nominees, but some of the policy stances that the president-elect has outlined will be taken out in the confirmation process on those nominees, such that it's a bridge too far for maybe the Republican to vote for an interior nominee. Not that they don't think that they can't do the job, it's just they disagree on policy, so they can't support them.
Right.
Yeah.
Realistic.
Yeah. Any questions about incoming administration? There's been a lot of preparation.
Well, there's also the issue, I think, of these nominees being brought forward at the same time the Senate may be contemplating a hearing on impeachment. So you really have a complicated political situation where I think it actually distracts a bit from where the administration wants to go. And that also could foster the divisiveness that we've seen potentially. So I think it's just I think the reason Peter's being cautious is because it's a very complicated situation right now.
Yeah. It's a good question, Carol, and great point, Eric.
Tough times. Anybody? Anything else, Peter?
Yes, covering just a few more topics here, build grants and ongoing effort to, I know Eric and Lisa have been really doing great work to get closer to an application, refining the list of projects. One once we're at that point, communicating with our friends, local officials, communicating with our delegation, having letters of support will be really important. Just general background, we've talked about this in the past. The federal bill grant program has been funded around $1 billion annually. About 50% goes to rural projects, 50% goes to urban, suburban projects. It's a great opportunity for the park district and the preliminary ideas that we've been talking about. And in the past, applications, preliminary applications are due in the March, April timeframe. Decisions are made by June. And so this will be a task in the first half of the year for sure. And I don't know if Eric or Lisa have anything else they want to add.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. I want to give compliments to Katie Hornbeck, our grants manager, and Sean Dugan, our trails manager, who have put together a list of 18 projects. As we've discussed with the board, we're taking this in a phase 1, phase 2 approach. Phase 1 is reviewing a list of all potential active transportation projects across the district. Our entire district is considered urban by the criteria of the build application. So we'll be looking at all of the potential projects, doing some analysis on them with Alta Consulting. These will be complete by about the February-March timeframe, at which point, using the newly posted build grant criteria, we'll be able to put together the most competitive package. And I'd also like to take the time to thank each of you for having a meeting with Eric and I to go over the list in detail and talk about your priorities. So in terms of next steps, we will be sharing the projects with cities who might be able to partner with us or provide that support and begin the communications across the region.
And just one last thing on that, the data that we will get from Alta is considering both criteria that was established during the last administration, but also looking at other potential elements that would have been considered more in the when the program was the Tiger program. So that data will be able to help us with whatever criteria moves forward this year and frankly next year. But it also helps us with grants at the state and regional level for MTC and for also active transportation program in Sacramento. So it's really, it's information that will be very helpful to us and really happy that we're moving forward with it.
Go ahead, Dee.
Will the 2020 census have an impact on the database that we provide or need?
Unfortunately, the 2020 census, it's looking like the information has been a bit delayed. So we're not expecting to receive the 2020 census until maybe April of May of this year, at which point, if we're going for an application this year, hopefully it'll be almost complete. So it likely won't have an impact on this specific initiative.
Okay, so Transportation Department will know that they won't need, no one will have census data for their.
That is correct. So we'll all be on the same playing field. We are looking at equity, safety, usage, visitation, and a number of things through the analysis that's about to begin. So
Okay.
We'll have estimates, but the census data for no one applying in California will be able to be factored.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure everybody's the same,
Okay,
has the same handicap.
equity.
Good question. Land and Water Conservation Fund implementation, the current administration has really slow walked implementation, but also not given Congress the details that they asked for projects. And so the Congress said, you need to give us more details if we're going to release this money. And the new administration gets to take over this headache that the current administration has made. It's unfortunate because there was so much bipartisan support last year to pass the permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, but that's where we are. and the new administration will have to make some revisions and provide information to the Congress, and hopefully the money will be able to proceed forward. But it's occupied a lot of time of our friend Joel, that we've met with in the past at the National Park Service. So I'll leave it there. If people have questions, I'll try to answer. Dee, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that the current land and water conservation money that was allocated for 2020 wasn't spent, and any unspent money would get rolled over into 2021. So potentially we would have, math in my head, 180, well, double the 900 million to work with.
Right. They have an idea of projects and how to spend all the money, but they need to provide more details or go back to the drawing board and come up with another set of projects. So it's going to be this balancing act between taking probably some of the projects or having to go and come up with some new, or go down their list to pick up a new project that is ready.
So just from your statement, it sounds like these have to be shovel-ready projects.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's all I have, and thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you for being here, and we wish you well in a very difficult environment.
Thank you. Appreciate the support and look forward to working with everyone here in this start to the new year.
Yeah, stay safe.
Stay safe, and we'll make progress together, right?
That's right.
That's what it's all about. We'll trust the man in charge. For the first time in a long time, I can say that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comment? Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
See you at the vault in a month, Peter.
Dee, did you have a question?
Not for Peter, but just as after hearing Peter speak, I would like to follow through with a motion to have a motion to that we could recommend to the board of directors.
Yes.
Condemn the actions that happened on January 6th. I think it's appropriate, and I know that I know my colleagues and I, when we got sworn in on January 12th, that those words of defending the Constitution of the United States were had a special gravitas, I think, for all of us, and I think it's appropriate that we do a resolution.
Should we ask Carol Victor to?
Yes. So I'm going to play two roles here as general manager and your district council. Since that item wasn't on the agenda, I don't think we should get a motion. But if you would like us to give direction to a general manager to bring forward a resolution for consideration for the full board, we can certainly do that.
Great. I would like.
I think that seems like appropriate direction. Dennis, you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Good thinking. Yeah, it's a very difficult time, and I think the more agencies and levels of government they can show support, the better things will feel in Washington, D.C. And good.
All right. So Eric and Lisa, get on that.
That was a quick assignment. Yeah, that was something like a real general manager. Go through it. Good.
But we will. I think all of us, and we will bring something serious, serious in light of the moment, and recognizing that it was a really special moment hearing the oath of office taken so close to the events on January 6th, and we'll bring something forward for the board's consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? Okay.
There are no public comments at this time.
No public comments, or boy, we're moving through without many public comments. Is this normal in this group? perhaps. All right. Anything further on the agenda? Eric?
Just really board member comments, if there are any.
Okay. Director Rosario, no, excuse me, President Rosario.
I think I appreciate all the work this committee's done. I think there's a lot of legislation, and I think we have our work cut out for us. But there's definitely bills out there that will benefit the Park District and the state of California. And I look forward to working with you and seeing what we can do to improve the Park District.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Dennis.
Well, thank you for another great meeting. I look forward to the virtual Sacramento trip in a week and a half. And I love the topics. And I know we hit on COVID relief funding. Is there any type of preamble that we can use with our legislators and suggest that, hey, remember, we are essential servants and we have been providing essential service. I know we will when we're asking for money from them for relief, but I'd also like to ask, or if we can wiggle it in some way, that we still have a group of employees who are frontline employees who are not, or in my opinion, and I think everybody else is way down the line in getting COVID vaccinations. And I don't know that that's, I don't know what it is, but I think we should continue to talk about that.
Okay. I assume we will get a refreshed list of what we need to have on our minds and short, clippy things to say when we go virtually to Sacramento. You know what I really was impressed about is our pushing for the Conservation Corps. Because if you look back, they did a lot for us a long time ago. And I think it's perfectly fitting to bring it back again. And so I'm glad that's on our agenda. Anything further? Eric, anything?
It looked like Carol may have had something.
Carol?
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, the news around COVID continues to be really sobering, which is that the CDC today said that by March, they're expecting another surge because of this highly contagious variant that they expect to be the predominant strand of COVID by March. And so it will be a surge. There was the Thanksgiving surge, the Christmas, New Year's surge, and now it's looking like we're looking at yet another surge. So we will continue just the messaging throughout the agency of the need for heightened vigilance, PPEs, and we just getting those vaccine
shots.
And so we'll take every opportunity to reinforce the messaging around COVID-19 prevention.
I appreciate that. And do we have a location that would be logical for the shots to be given?
Our COVID planning team is looking at if there's been any sites. I think the Coliseum is being offered as an Alameda County site, and the most we could offer would, I don't know that we have any facilities that have good traffic circulation that would be suitable, but we are looking into it. If they wanted like a large parking lot, we certainly have those throughout the Park District, and or a large park area, we have that. But is it easily to get to, convenient to transportation and good circulation? So we are in touch with the public health officers, and if they have a request that we think we can fulfill, we will definitely explore that with them.
However we can help them. Frankly, huge sites are probably not as effective to get people through fast as smaller ones that have good circulation. In my mind, I've thought of the college out here, Las Casitas, virtually empty, and parking lots are huge. but not that huge, and would sort of scatter them throughout the whole county. It's not an easy issue. Okay, Eric, you'll make sure that we get whatever information we need for the trip to Sacramento, or Lisa.
Yes, we will.
Okay, if there is nothing further, thank you very much for putting up with a new chair. It's interesting to hear about all the legislation, and I like to hear that we are making progress. And again, best wishes to you, Peter, because it's very difficult back there, but we're glad to have you working for us.
Thank you. Appreciate the support and look forward again to working with you and the rest of the team.
Well, you're very knowledgeable, and I know in Washington, D.C. that helps. Okay, with that, I will declare us adjourned. Everybody go take a walk. How's that?
Yay.
Advice. Thank
Sure,
you.
everybody.
All right,
I like
thank
to
you.
give a good order that most people want to go along with.